evening. Welcome to Week, the political roundtable for the Commonwealth Club World Affairs of California. I'm John Zipperer, your host for Week, and of course the club's vice president of media and editorial. If you got a cell phone or something that makes noise, oh, I love it that you're actually checking. That's good. That's good. Please silence it, or we will mock you mercilessly. Okay. I'm glad you could join us tonight, either here or those of us who are watching or listening online. These are strange days. I flew in today from Chicago, and it's kind of a time when your domestic flight, you take off in a democracy, you're not sure if you're going to land in one. So.
And was it windy like here?
No, it's actually beautiful in Chicago right now. Come and join us. But anyway. On that happy note, let's meet our panelists for tonight. And starting on the far end is Melissa Caen. She's an attorney and political journalist, and you all know her well. Welcome back, Melissa. In the middle is Dan Borenstein, opinion editor for the Bay Area News Group. Welcome back. And next to me is Bob Gardner. He's the CEO of the Advocacy Group. He's a veteran Republican advertising maker and strategist, and he's the right side columnist for the Sonoma Index-Tribune. So welcome back, Bob. You all know how we do it here. There are question cards spread throughout the room. Write down a question. Our wonderful volunteers will collect those and bring them up to me. Especially if you do it earlier in the hour, we have a better chance of working them into our conversation today. So let's start with the conversation, the topic that probably everyone's expecting us to talk about, and that is Los Angeles and the military on the streets. So yesterday, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass established an overnight curfew to try to calm things down there, where they've seen both peaceful and non-peaceful protest actions against the deportations by ICE, as well as the presence of the National Guard and now the Marines. Reports I saw this afternoon, and anyone correct me if there have been other things, but reports I saw were that it was a more peaceful night. They had a few people arrested for, violating the curfew, but it was not they didn't see the violence and the vandalism they saw on previous nights. So I'm going to start with Dan. Just start with a big canvas here. What do you make of what's going on in Los Angeles? What are the most important aspects of it that you see?
Well, I think the obvious most important part is what this means in terms of the militarization of life in this country. This is pushing it to an extent we haven't seen in my lifetime. Certainly we did have some use of National Guard in a situation like this in the 60s, but for a completely different purpose. Basically to uphold civil rights laws at the time. This is something entirely different, and I think the implications of it are pretty disconcerting and pretty profound as to whether we want to and whether we are about to watch for political purposes the National Guard and then the military being used within our own country, within our own land, not for defensive purposes, but let's be clear, for political purposes. That to me, John, is like beyond everything else. That's what it's all about, and I think it's very disconcerting. I wouldn't say it's surprising. I hate to say it, but I don't think it's surprising. But it should give us all pause. I think this is we've seen in the last. It's June, so we are now almost 5 months in. We've seen a lot of things that some people sort of predicted, but I think this is taking certain parts of it to a whole new level. At the same time that we've got the big bill pushing through, at the same time.
The big, beautiful bill.
I just left it at the big bill, okay? And at the same time that we have the person basically in charge of our health care, basically turning it upside down, but it's unfortunate. There's so many things going on at one time that it's kind of hard to keep track of it all. but in certain ways, this is the part that is the most devastating, and it's, no, I'm not sure necessarily most egregious, because I think there's so many things. I think it's kind of hard to compare. In certain ways, these almost aren't comparable in a certain way. They all in their own ways have serious repercussions down the line. But this is the most visible. It's the most distracting in the sense, and it has repercussions for how we live, depending on how it plays out. They're very frightening.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Melissa.
Well, I agree with Dan here, but I do want to say what you point out is important, because it isn't obviously the first time that the National Guard has been used inside the U.S. to enforce federal law. The issue is, in enforcing civil rights law, that was a thing that we liked. And right, so I just want to make sure people are careful, because if you start going down the road of like, oh, states' rights, you can end up on the wrong side of some stuff pretty fast and start sounding like some Southern governor in 1956, right? So when you hear people talking about, oh, it's states' rights and this is militarization, it's like, well, yes, but also it's the fact that you just don't like the thing that they're doing. And that's okay. You don't have to like it, but to acknowledge that this isn't a federalism argument necessarily. I mean, Eisenhower sent the 101st Airborne Division into Arkansas to integrate their schools. Yes, was it the use of military on the U.S. soil? Of course, but we survived, and the issue was a different one, as you point out. And so, it's important to sort of try to disentangle. You hear there's a lot of like, listening to Gavin Newsom, you start to go, wait a minute, sir. Those comments taken about authoritarianism and, dictatorship, it's like you sound like Governor Wallace sometimes when you talk like that. Be careful, right? Like the underlying thing is the thing. And for some people, there really is a big distinction between the civil rights laws and enforcing immigration laws, but there hasn't been any allegation, at least so far that I'm aware of, but this changes by the second, so let me know, that the agents were doing something unlawful. They may have been doing something that was deliberately provocative. Yes, it might have been something that we think is mean and we don't like, but there hasn't been, even in the legal documents that have been filed, there's been no allegation that they're sort of acting outside of the federal law. So they are actually out there trying to do the thing. It's an unfortunate fact, but that is what it is.
Here's the thing, Melissa, that I do think, though, is distinguishable in a certain sense. I agree with you, in terms of there is precedent, and states' rights is not the argument. It's a problematic path to go down. I think the distinction, though, here is that it's purely, in my thinking and the way I think this is all a political play. In a certain way. In other words, it's for political purposes, and that's where, whereas the past attempts were to uphold the Supreme Court rulings of the day,
when Johnson's ordering the Guard to protect in Alabama to protect civil rights activists, that seems like a pretty political play for someone who disagrees. I don't, to be clear, but for someone who would disagree with that, I think they would say that that's political too. In some ways, it's all political.
This is evil.
Oh, okay. Well, then there you go.
Okay, but
I do think there is a degree. There is a degree. Look. We can step back and we can say everything within our country and all these debates are political by nature, but I think there is an underlying principle that was used in the past. Right now, I really do think this is being done not for the stated purpose, but for a political purpose, and not for a goal, but for boosting a sense of power that I find pretty intimidating and frightening in a certain way.
Okay.
And I think that's the distinction I would draw.
Well, if you don't like Trump, you're not going to like what's going on. If you do like Trump, you are. And the polls show that the last poll I saw was 56% approved of what he was doing.
What about California?
Oh, probably zero. But you know, we're all. I want to say before I get stoned here. I mean, literally stoned, not.
It's the Bay Area.
Is that I'm more of a traditional California Republican, which I would say is liberal on social issues, conservative on fiscal issues, and a hawk on foreign policy. And that was the traditional California mode for Republican Party. I did, just a minute, okay. I have not voted for Trump. I did TV ads against him in 2016, which doesn't mean that I don't like a lot of the things that he's doing, but I certainly don't like him. I mostly agree with Melissa. I think this is largely political. I think Gavin, somehow somebody read him the 10th Amendment for the first time, and he's glommed onto it. You know, all of a sudden he's states' rights, and he is you know, our own little George Wallace right now, whether you like the cause or not. And when you see the visuals of a CHP car on fire, and then commentator is saying that, oh, well, not much is going on here, and you know, the police have it under control. Visuals, I can tell you, count a lot more than words. So Trump will say that if he hadn't done this, that the whole city would have erupted. Now, of course, that's an exaggeration. But again, with Trump, nobody should be too surprised. I mean, this is not somebody who is telegraphed one way and governed another. I mean, this has been going on since he started running for president. So he's been consistent. So we should not be surprised by a lot of the things that he's doing. I think that he's somebody that enjoys pushing limits. And whether the limits become the electorate or the courts, or perhaps if the Democrats take control of Congress, which they're in no way about to do. I mean, the Democrat Party is just terrible shambles. That he will keep pushing. And you know, in this administration, the second administration, he does not have some of the people, the mature people who are pushing back on him, who he got rid of. He's got people who agree with him, except for Musk right now. But that's another thing we can go into. So you know, at defense, and you know, there's some very weak people in the administration, but there are also some very good ones. So we can go into that later. But whoever said it's all political, it's all political.
Melissa, I know you've done some research on going into how the government has this power and why. And I found it really interesting. Could you share some of that?
Oh, man. Talking about our green room talk. Okay. So I was saying that I was doing some research. I always try to do some homework and bring something to the table for you fine people. And so I was looking at both the legal filings and also the sort of the law at issue that everyone's fighting over. It is not the Posse Comitatus Act, by the way. I know during the tariffs, everyone learned about Smoot-Hawley, and now everyone knows about Posse Comitatus. It's a great Twitter education that keeps happening every time something happens. So, but that's actually not the law that's really at issue in this case. It's this law that goes back to, at least in statutory form, to 1903, potentially 1795, however, depending on how you look at it. But I was looking at the 1903 law, the one that really is the thing that is the law now. And it, if you look at the debates, at the time, we didn't really have a big military. If you think about the Spanish War, the American War with the Spanish over Cuba, we didn't, Teddy Roosevelt showed up with some of his friends and got on a boat and went and fought. Like, it was pretty haphazard as it goes in terms of National Reserve and having an army. And at the time, we had a very small army and no income tax and that sort of thing, so no money. And so the idea was, we'll have a big set of national reservists throughout America. It's cheaper. It's contractors, right? It's not employees. We can kind of bring them in when we need them. And so they create this law that gives all this power to the president to call them up, because at the time, again, we didn't really have a big military. But sort of fast forward, now we, of course, do. But this law is still on the books. And it's the kind of principle that was used during both sort of integration and other kinds of situations where the federal government needed to step in. But it's interesting that the law stays on the books and was restated in 1956 for obvious reasons. But the law is, and I know y'all are not going to like this, at least some of y'all aren't going to like this, but I think the state is going to lose on this, because the law is very, very broad. The power it gives to the president, remember, in the Constitution, the president executes the laws. He takes care to see that the laws are enforced. That's it. And if these guys are acting to pursuing federal law, that's what they get to do, and he gets to bring in the reserves to do this. I actually printed out the text of the law, and I'm just going to read you the parts that are relevant here. Says, whenever the president is unable with regular forces to execute the laws of the United States, the president may call into federal service members of units of the National Guard of any state in such numbers as he considers necessary to repel the invasion, suppress the rebellion, or execute those laws. Orders for these purposes shall be issued through the governors of the states, or in the case of the District of Columbia, through the commanding general of the District of Columbia. So, at issue in the legal case is, what does through the governors mean, right? If you look at the legislative history, it looks like it's just a military reporting structure, because National Guard folk are sort of part of the state, but also part of the Army. And so there's sort of two masters that they serve. And so it sounds like it's just a reporting issue, but according to the state, no, you have to confer with the governor and you have to get his permission to bring in the National Guard. And you didn't do that. And so you can't be here. So that's part of what the big argument is through the governors. Again, I don't think it's a very strong argument, because you can see, again, back to our Alabama, example, you can see plenty of instances where the governor does not want you there, but you need to go there to execute federal law anyway. So the law itself is very broad, and the cases that interpret it have almost no guardrails. In the Constitution, there are two guardrails: elections every 4 years, and money. Congress can cut off funding for whatever military jaunt the president gets on that they don't want him to be on. But there's no quick way to stop this based on sort of what the legal precedent is. I don't think the state has a very good case. And the reason I know that, too, is because the thing they ask for, forget what the governor tweets, the thing they actually ask for is, in the TRO, all we want is for the federal troops, both the Marines and the federalized National Reservists, to only guard federal buildings and federal employees in the buildings. That's all they've asked for. They have not said, give us our National Guard back. They've not said, get your ass out of here. All they've said is, please stick to the buildings and the people in the buildings. In other words, please don't go with ICE agents out into the world and protect them outside the federal buildings. That's actually the weird legal fight they're having, is do you have the right to protect federal employees outside of federal buildings, or must you stay inside? So my point is, the state isn't even asking for the things they say they're asking. They're actually just asking for a very circumscribed thing, and it's an acknowledgement that there really is a lot of power to deploy National Guard troops and military to protect federal assets. Anyway, sorry, that's an 11-minute answer. But
Melissa, that's really interesting. Let me ask you, and I'd be curious for all you. Do you think this stops with LA and California?
I don't know. I don't know how many people are throwing cinder blocks at ICE agents in other cities. I mean,
well, this is California has the most populace so I can't imagine this going on in New Hampshire.
Right. No, I agree. But can you imagine this? I find it hard to imagine that there won't be some incident Maybe this Saturday, when there are the demonstrations all over the Bay Area, they're scheduled. I find it hard to believe that there won't be some incident that will provide the justification under the law, technical justification, whether needed or not, that this is coming to the Bay Area within that.
I did hear that, like, just for San Francisco, speaking for that the San Francisco city leaders have been meeting about what to do if.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't mean to be glib about the cinder block thing. I mean, the one of the things the precursors to invoking this, you have to have a problem, right? Like there's no question, even the government concedes in their own filings, like that there was a lot of bad things happening. In exhibits to their own filing, there are pictures of cars on fire. Like, it's not like, right? And so it would have to be something like that. In San Francisco, we did have some demonstration this last week. It was dealt with pretty handily by SFPD. And if your police department can handle, people who are,
So where's the I guess what I'm saying is, so where's the line then? Where I'm not challenging your interpretation.
Oh yeah, I agree. The law.
I totally. I guess what I'm saying is, what I'm hearing is that it really doesn't matter how well the locals are handling it if it's seen as.
If you're getting in the way of the federal government and federal government employees executing legitimate federal laws, and I'm sorry you might not like them, but these are the rules.
The ICE agents, right.
Then potentially yes.
Yeah. So it just seems like
it's one thing to protest a thing that's happening. It's another thing to impede it. That's okay. I think at least the language of the
So it's really just a matter of time, isn't it, before some incident happens. That's the triggering event.
Well, like Mayor Lurie was saying yesterday that San Francisco should be a model for the rest of the country on how to handle this, and because they didn't, he didn't have to call the governor to ask for the National Guard and troop, and Trump didn't try to do it. So, however, we in the city are handling it. So far, so good. And he's out there saying, look to us. We know what we're doing. Saying this nationally.
One possible response to that, to what you're raising, Dan, is noting this as a political response. Okay, well then, did he need to use LA, or did he feel that he needed to use LA as an example, or does he think he needs to do it further in order to do whatever effect, whether you think it's legitimate or not, or called for or not, and certainly there are plenty of people who are saying, okay, he's, taking the cap off the thing that makes all the springy things jump out. I hope someone knows what I'm talking about. Let the genies out.
Was that a Jack in the Box?
Sure, let's go with that. Bob, we've been talking about Gavin Newsom a bit here. What do you think of? Do you think he's got a plan for how to respond, or has this been him making it up as he goes along?
Well, I think Gavin goes, before he goes to bed every night, he gets down on his knees and says, "Please arrest me. Please arrest me," because he wants to be a martyr in this, and. And that, getting a governor arrested, that's a kind of a Trumpian thing to do. And it's no surprise that Trump doesn't like us out here, doesn't like California, and loves to take pot shots at, it happens to be LA right now, but it could easily be here. Mm-hmm. And so he and Gavin kind of have a tech bro type relationship of they're together on some things, and then they hate each other, then they like each other, and then they hate each other, and it to me it's like a kabuki play. It just none of this is very surprising, and but we all know that Gavin has his eyes on the prize, and he is. He's out there. He's got his podcast. He's actually invited conservatives on the podcast, people from Trump administration. He knows that what a total disaster the Democrats were in the last election, and they don't have a path forward. There's no leadership, and he wants to step into that vacuum and be the leader. And might as well. I mean, I think he's, if I were a Democrat, actually, I talk about this later. I have a favorite Democrat, but I'm not going to reveal it now.
Dan, rate Governor Newsom so far on this.
Well,
do you disagree? Or?
This is interesting. I don't know if any of you heard his little, was it 7, 8, however many minute speech last night, which apparently had some technical hiccups, I've heard, but was on. You can see it on YouTube. It was a rare moment for Gavin Newsom, where he was actually succinct, on point, very thoughtful, and he kind of met the moment. Unfortunately, part of the reason for that is, unlike most of the time, it seemed like he was actually reading from a script and was actually disciplined, which is something that Newsom generally is not. He, as we've seen, as you pointed out, the 4-hour State of the City addresses and such that he was known for in San Francisco. He is notoriously undisciplined. We saw that during the pandemic. I cannot tell you how many Zoom press conferences I had to sit through with him, where he went on literally on what should have been a 10-minute quick message for an hour and a half. And we saw it earlier in this week. I think the worst thing he could do is start engaging by saying, "Come on, arrest me," or that's to meet the moment. He needs to rise above it. He needs to show himself to be a statesman. Now, he did that last night in the scripted moment, but when he gets off script, that wasn't before, and I doubt it will be after.
Melissa?
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's one of these, it's this moment of, and we were laughing because as soon as he said, "Oh, did you see the 10-minute speech?" And we were like, "Oh, it must have been written by someone else," because he would never just give a 10-minute speech.
That is probably Gavin's shortest speech ever.
It's really something. So, he's clearly listening to somebody on some issues, but then he's going to tweet, "Come get me," or, "I'm going to stop paying taxes," and, something like that. We're going to be right back into the muck. And look, he sees him, he'd never let a good crisis go to waste. I don't know. Only time will tell if being tied to, the pictures of people burning American flags and things. This does not sell well outside of California, at least, I'll tell you that. Being the guy who's standing in front of that going, "It was fine. We had it under control. Please get out. This is tyranny." Being that guy, I don't know if that's going to be the right step to national office. Maybe it will. Maybe being that guy will be a great thing down the road. But he's certainly, tying himself very closely to this issue and this cause in opposition to President Trump. And maybe it's just a short-term, sort of gain. But this is going to be the thing that people know and remember about him for a lot of folks who are outside of the Bay Area.
I have to ask, because it did get a lot of attention when Newsom made it. This claim of, we can stop paying taxes to the federal government because we're, a major funder of it. Melissa, is that even possible?
Give us some more free legal advice.
You can cancel your legal Zoom account.
I'm so glad you asked. Exhibit B.
I rest my case.
He writes this tweet and he links to the CNN article, which links to this report. And so if you go to the report and say, okay, what is this? Just as we all know, there's no easy way to say, here's how much money comes in, here's how much money goes out. Every study about this kind of donor state thing is kind of a cobbling together of stuff. So this is one of those studies. It just came out. So when I looked at what are the things that are in the sort of outgoing bucket, like the things that the governor could stop, right? Like, what's the thing? How do we give money to the federal government? According to the report he cited, personal income tax, which the state does not have anything to do with. Sadly, no one can stop. And certainly not wage earners. Employment taxes like Social Security and Medicare, which again, California is not a mediator there. Corporate income tax, not a mediator there. There are certain excise taxes, like taxes on motor fuel, tobacco, and alcohol, that I think the state does remit a little bit to the government, or they kind of look at each other and go, you owe me 10, I owe you 10, and we're just going to call it even. So there's not a lot of money going back and forth. Now, this is a thing that we all might remember from the first Trump administration when the same threat was made. And when I was a reporter for CBS at the time, we had to cover this same thing, which was, you cannot do this. There's no line item in the budget like to go to the federal government that you could veto. Like, that's not how it works. But Gavin Newsom knows this. Again, this is round 2 of this. And President Trump knows this. And yet, Gavin Newsom's like, we'll stop paying taxes. And the president, instead of saying, that's dumb, you can't do that, says, that's un-American, you're, trying to screw your constituents. And there's this, they both know. And they're fighting anyway. And I was telling them backstage, at some point you're fighting and fighting and fighting, and then you're dancing. And then you're actually enjoying this. You have a nemesis now. You're a Democrat in California. How bored are you? Right? Like, how much fun are you having this fight and just making stuff up? And the president's like, oh, yeah, well, you're an American. Instead of saying, again, you can't do that. He's just saying, well, this is un-American. Like, they're weirdly, I think, both kind of getting something out of this fight.
They're getting a lot out of it.
Yeah.
They're both getting political traction for their bases, if you will, and it serves both their political ends, which is what makes it so sad that Gavin's gotten in the gutter on this issue like this, instead of being, as he showed for that brief moment, statesman-like. It's exactly right. You add that one to the list, along with come and arrest me. It's an unfortunate moment, because while he met the moment last night, he hasn't been. This is another example where he's just not meeting the moment, but he's meeting the political opportunist.
Well, there's not
moment.
a big market for statesmanship right now.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Well taken.
Someone from the audience asked a question that kind of takes us and enlarges the focus of it, talking about the spread of demonstrations that we had mentioned across the country. Does Trump want to stir this up, or has he misunderstood how far or how it could spread? Bob, if this is theater or if this is a projection of power.
Well, it's a projection of power, but they would say, these are people who came in illegally. They broke the law, and we are going to, primarily try to find criminals and deport them. It's a sad thing for, I think, especially for California. I think, I live in Sonoma, so I'm certainly acquainted with plenty of people who I'm pretty sure are not legal, who do a lot of good work. And there's a lot of consternation up there about, who might get deported, and raids and so on. And nobody likes to see the federal government, come in and raid, Hispanic-oriented organizations or whatever. But I suppose it could happen. But I think Trump loves deploying the military. He says he doesn't want to get us into wars, and I hope that's true. But look what's coming up for his birthday in a week or so. I don't know if we've had a military parade in this country since the end of World War II.
I think the Gulf War.
And the Gulf War, yeah. But we're going to have one. And I think he. I can tell you, as somebody who's been in the swamp for several years, not lately, all presidents think that Congress is an obstacle. They all hate Congress. You might think otherwise, but presidents want to do what they want to do. And I'm president of the United States. I want to press a button and have X, Y, or Z happen. And I don't want any obstacles. And it doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or Democrat. They all want that. They all think if the courts go your way, I mean, everybody, probably most people in this room think the Supreme Court is way over to the right and awful and stuff. But in the 60s and 70s, it was way over to the left. And there are a lot of presidents, including Democrats, who going back to FDR, trying to pack the court. I mean, there have always been these obstacles to presidential power, and I'm not concerned about the death of democracy or any of that stuff. I think there are plenty of guardrails, although Trump will test them all.
But this really is a political winner for him.
It is.
Right. I mean,
Sure.
Chances are he won't be doing this in Texas. He'll probably.
The governor there is calling out the National Guard.
Yeah,
himself,
I mean, he would like nothing better than to stick it to California and to stick it to Gavin Newsom, right? I mean, let's be clear, right? Sure. And it's no accident that the first place he pushed, for many reasons. It's got multiple purposes. California does have the largest immigrant population, and California is his nemesis, so he gets a twofer out of the deal, right? And he gets it's a trifecta if you consider that it also happens to be run by Gavin Newsom, right? And he wins on all fronts with this one politically.
Yeah. Well, this just in, not everybody in the rest of the country loves California.
Yeah, or Gavin Newsom. That's right. Yeah.
Really,
yeah.
I had to break it to you.
Yeah, and the flip side of it is that California doesn't quite realize too much of California doesn't quite realize where the rest of the nation is, right? And part of the problem is,
well, the Democrats these days, and this includes publications like the New York Times, are acting like anthropologists from the 1920s going to New Guinea. They're going around to the rest of the country and looking at these rural villages and saying, well, how could they think like this? And who are these people? But the Democrats realize they have to somehow get to know these people again, or they're never going to get power back.
That's great. I don't know if you've seen the stories about the Democrats are spending $20 million for this 2-year study to understand young men. Young men particularly, but men more broadly as well, which is hilarious, right? Because people have been talking for years of why they're losing the male vote. Melissa, I mean, is this a sign of the Democrats being out of touch, or are they trying to become in touch? Or is this like the post-Mitt Romney election where the Republicans were like, why don't Hispanics like us? And then, of course, they memory hold that.
Is this binders and binders of women?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you wonder how you can spend $1 billion and lose an election, $20 million for a study of the syntax and word usage of young men is one way you do it. Like, where'd all the money go? Crap like this. Like, although I also feel like maybe I'm in the wrong business. I should just, take the check and go, stop telling them they're bad. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Like it's just not that hard. So. But it's just one of these, like, have they learned anything is a question. And it's one of these, look, maybe you need to, because this is what, and look, Republicans did this too. If you look at the postmortem, it was more, the result was we have to communicate better, right? We don't have to change our principles. We just have to communicate them better. And that's what the Democrats have told themselves too, that like, that's the thing. We just have to keep trying to sell this product that a non-majority of people want to buy. We just have to sell this thing better, instead of really examining what is the thing we are trying to sell. Like, let's just, get a new logo. And so that'll be the thing. And so it does reflect, and at least on some part, I think some people are looking a little deeper, but it does seem like some of the leadership, for example, and some of the people with who have the money are still saying, oh no, there's a way to kind of brand ourselves back into relevance versus really interrogate what we stand for and whether we want to hold those principles and stay a minority party, or if we want to change some of the things that we're doing or some of the things that we believe genuinely and try to win elections.
Well, speaking personally, I think the more money spent on communications, the better.
I bet you do.
Dan, I mean, so Bill Clinton became president. He was kind of an outgrowth of, or at least a participant in, at one point a leader of, the Democratic Leadership Council, right? They were a group that said, the party has gone too far left, we need to follow these other ideas that are more center left. And he won that argument in terms of, obviously he became president, got reelected. As I've written elsewhere, Obama maybe presented himself as a progressive, but he governed as a Clintonite center-left president. Is that, of course, we all saw here in Ground Zero in California, Ronald Reagan, before he became president, fought a battle for the soul of his party. Again, whether you agree with where it went or not, he was fighting on the ideas that where he thought that party should be, and he won it. But do you see is there any movement in the Democratic Party that is saying, okay, how do we become an electable party, not by trying to find out why men are men, but, again, the stuff that we're talking about we want to do, or how we do it, not just how we sell it. I mean, is there an analog to the DLC or some other movement like that?
Well, I mean, there will be certainly discussions of it, but I get very concerned when I see basically, and maybe this is because I live in this California fishbowl where I'm constantly, encountering it, but I just keep seeing Democrats in this state totally out of touch with where the country as a whole is. And until they, and this is probably a national issue too, until they start to understand where the country is, we can watch these protests go on in California as much as you want, but it ain't going to change the leadership in Washington. And unless they can change the leadership in Washington, elections really matter, and national elections are what are driving what we're witnessing. And trying to fight it on California terms is a losing cause.
I guess I'm always reminded of, and this might just make people mad, but
Yeah.
I'm always reminded of, I don't know if it was the Seattle, World Trade riots, or if it was some other big protest movement, but where journalists went in and were talking to some of these folks who had been, kind of running amok, and asking them, well, did you vote? They're like, no.
Yeah.
It's like,
That was Portland.
was that Portland? Okay. Portland, thank you.
Yeah. No,
The people that are exciting the Democrats most now is Sanders and AOC. They're getting big turnouts.
Literally just got a question about that.
yeah, which is exactly the problem with the party.
Yeah.
Because and I say that to a certain extent, but let's flash back for 1 second to that 2012 study post Mitt Romney, right? Of course,
Yeah.
in which basically the party was sort of told, well, you kind of need to moderate things and tone it down and appeal across, and here's how to do it. And of course, come 2016, Trump throws all that out, right, and does it his way,
Yeah.
and ignores it all and wins. So, to a certain extent, it's not only about the policy spectrum, it is about the person.
That is exactly.
But I think there's still parameters to how far you can be outside of that swing before you and still get traction.
Well, and
I don't think AOC or Bernie Sanders can get in this day and age can get national traction. Do you?
No.
Yeah.
But at least they're drawing some people. And
They're drawing some
so there's
people,
no,
yeah.
right now, I mean, there will be, because there has to be. There's no centrist counter or centrist in Democrat terms, counter to what they are talking about.
Okay. So, Bob, I think a lot of folks have been kind of assuming that the Democrats were on a flight path that would take them to a happy landing in the next midterm elections. You were saying earlier today, or earlier in this program, no, they're not in a good shape to take control of Congress. Why do you think that? Because it's such a razor thin.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it won't happen. That they could take control of the. They're not going to take control of the Senate. They can take control of the House, by a few votes, and also external things can happen. I mean, we're talking today, and this election is a long way away. So all kinds of things can happen that could swing that, where they could end up with large majorities, or which is likely now, the Republicans will keep control of both houses. Now, again, that can change. There are a lot of very vulnerable, both Democrats and Republicans in swing districts. And again, those things can go down to the wire. They can go down to the last week or the last couple of days, and things can change. So, but we're talking, June, whatever this is, and it doesn't look good.
It seems like every time we're heading into a U.S. senatorial election, we hear, okay, this is a bad map for the Democrats this year. And, because it's which seats are up and which ones are vulnerable and such. And I hear that, and then I kind of think, okay, well, at some point this cycle will flip. I think I've heard that, though, for every 2 years for the past, as long as I've been paying attention to it. Dan, do the Democrats have any good map coming up, at least on the senatorial?
I haven't done the analysis every 2 years, but the next two are bad. I completely agree that 2026 would be a huge reach. It would have to really, they'd have to have everything break, and I just don't see it happening. The House is obviously in play, but the dynamics of that are just so different. But I don't, and I'll go do the analysis for you beyond that. But
Melissa, any thoughts on
2062? That is going to be the map for the
Democrats. But it is important for us to realize how quickly these things can change, because we all in this room, I think we're all old enough looking around the room, we certainly remember 2012, where everybody was saying the map has been flipped permanently, and this is a whole new era in this nation. Well, or I guess it would be 2008, right? And we saw how long that lasted.
Yeah.
It lasted one president, right?
Okay, I want to kind of go back to Governor Newsom, but on a different topic, and that is the state budget. Well, I mean, so Newsom and the legislative leaders have been battling over this budget. Medi-Cal coverage is, I guess, a hot point of contention between them. Any thoughts on how far apart they are? Is a good budget? Are we near one? Are they still in the kind of fantasy land of each kind of saying, I want pie in the sky? Any thoughts?
Well, we had the legislature this week come up with their plan. At least they're internally agreeing.
Okay.
Of course, their numbers are even worse than Gavin's numbers are. And Gavin's numbers were put together with, a little bit of chewing gum and baling wire, right? I mean, it's, remember that it was just how many years ago that we had the biggest surplus the world has ever seen or the nation has ever seen? Well, that was wrong, and we've got a serious structural deficit, and the governor's not willing to address it, and the legislature's even less willing to address it. So making these tough decisions on how you provide the services you're talking about and still live within fiscal reality, that's a tough political ask, and there doesn't seem to be the will to do it.
Now, do they have to have a balanced budget?
No.
Is that by law? No?
No, they don't have to have it. They do on paper, but that's done with accounting gimmicks.
So they can say this $30 billion will come from unicorns.
Well,
That'll take
one
care
of the most common tricks, as an example, is you simply do the payroll at the end of the fiscal year. You just push it into the next fiscal year, right, by a day. Problem solved. That's a big, right? I mean, these are the kinds of gimmicks that, you know, and it's not just at the state level. It's at the local level too, you know, and certainly, and the only difference between that and the federal level is the feds can keep borrowing money, right? Which the rest of the nation can't.
Maybe Newsom will come out and say, we'll print our own money.
Well,
California bucks.
Yes.
Amazing.
Melissa, any thought on the budgets? Or?
Well, I mean, to Dan's point, there's always tricks. I mean, the thing that you just said is absolutely true. It was true in 2008, and it's been at least, and potentially even further back than that. What the other trick is to leave long-term pension obligations just out of the budget altogether. They sort of reclassify that, so you can say, oh, I have a balanced budget, or oh, we have a surplus, when in reality, if you take into account our pension obligations going forward, it is not a pretty picture. And so they are continuing to do these things. And so they have these fights around the edges, but the truth is, at its core, the budget is still, you know, just enormous and in no way balanced, and will just continue going on like a rickety old truck or something. I don't know what metaphor I'm going for, but you know what I mean? They just, you know, everyone just tapes it up long enough to get out of office, essentially.
And by the way, that pension liability is no joke. Oh. It's a huge, you know, and basically what it is the failure. You have to pay those people the pension obligations that the pensions they've already accrued and earned. And we've failed for years and years and years, both at the state and the local level, to properly fund it. And I've been writing columns for 15 years now saying this day is coming. Well, it has really arrived. And you only have to look at some of the cities. I just did an analysis with Oakland, column coming out soon, that basically, but for their pension obligations that they failed to properly fund in the past, they'd be in great shape today. You know, and that's true with most of the cities, and probably, I haven't done the analysis of the state, but the day of reckoning, you know, is really arriving.
Bob, any?
Well, I think this is the result of single-party rule, which we've had in this state for a long, long time, and frankly, no signs. Although Trump made some inroads in Black and Hispanics, and certainly the eastern part of the state, I don't see any change in that. But personally, if I were a Democrat, I'd want to see a return to somebody like Jerry Brown and being a fiscal tightwad, because I think he kept the crazies in the legislature under control, and Gavin doesn't do that.
Yeah, well, and the difference is Jerry had some gravitas. His second time around, that Gavin just doesn't have, in terms of his ability to be the statesman, if you will. I mean, can you imagine Jerry saying, "Come arrest me"? You know, no. You know.
It's possible Gavin Newsom is watching this, so don't take it too tough. I mean, you're a governor. Yeah. Okay, well, let's stop talking about the governor. And I wanted to talk a bit about mayors, because we've had a number of mayoral changeovers in recent months, and in the case of Oakland in recent days. So let's actually stay with you, Dan, and talk about your new mayor, Barbara Lee. What should we expect?
Well, look, she came into office, she ran saying that she could bring together the council to put the city on a responsible course. And Oakland has a very convoluted political system with a council that operates independently of the mayor, So all the mayor does is propose the budget, and the city council then does what it's going to do with it. And the mayor's out of the picture once that happens. But she said, with my gravitas, with my being able to work with both sides, we can figure this out and come together. The city of Oakland today passed their budget, the city council, and shall we say, if there was any hope that they were going to put their city back on a fiscally responsible course, it all imploded today. And if that was Barbara Lee's big test, she just flunked it.
Did she have any input into the budget, or?
She had input into the preparation of the proposed budget.
Okay.
Here's the thing about Oakland. Literally, the mayor proposes the budget, but the mayor does not even attend city council meetings. The mayor does not. It's like no other city in terms of it. She has no role after she sends the council her proposed budget. She's out of the picture then, so it's all politics. And she ran on this notion that I can politic this and bring some, that I have enough respect. Well, what came out today was a mess.
Is there any hope for a charter reform over there?
Yes, there's some discussion going on in charter. There was a Steve Falk, who was the former city administrator, acting city administrator in Oakland for about, I think, 6 months or a year. Actually saw it from the inside. He was a city manager elsewhere for many, many years. He knows how cities should run, and he wrote a piece, an op-ed for us back in December, in which he said, this is a mess, we got to fix it. And there are serious discussions going on. Barbara Lee ran on the notion that she wanted some sort of charter reform, but she did not commit to what it would be. Okay, Falk and his group has now put out their proposal, which makes a lot of sense. And I won't go into details of it, but where Barbara Lee is and where the labor unions in the city are going to be, which is frankly really important in the politics of the city, is still unclear. But the city needs charter reform. It needs to have the mayor sitting on the city council. It needs to have a city administrator/manager who reports not just to the mayor, but to the entire city council. There are so many things that are broken about the way Oakland runs, and there needs to be charter reform. Absolutely, yeah.
Glad to hear.
Yeah, and there is discussion going on about it. Yeah.
Bob, do you think that'll clear everything up for Oakland? Does that sink
Well, charter
your traditional
reform
conservative heart?
I don't know how it works to actually get charter reform.
Ballot. Yeah, it has to go on the ballot. So there has to be some sort of plan, and of course, if people start arguing and putting up competing measures, what'll happen as a political consultant, right?
Yeah.
They'll all go down, and we'll be left with exactly where we are right now. Yeah.
So, do you think that? I'm trying to think of Barbara Lee's opponent's name.
Oh, Lauren Taylor?
Yeah, that he would have done a better job?
No.
Oh.
No.
Because of who he was, or because of the situation?
Because of the situation. Because here's the situation. Exactly for this reason, that the only hope was that the mayor could work with the council and put together some sort of rational, plan. Mm-hmm. And the bottom line of it is that Taylor had no allies on the council practically. So he wasn't certainly going to do it. So the really only hope then was that Lee would be able to come in and do it. She didn't take office till late in the process, number one. And number two, even though she said that she had a lot of input into the proposed budget, apparently the council wanted to go their own way, even still.
Well, on that note, folks, thank you to our panel, Bob Gardner, Dan Borenstein, and Melissa Caen for a great conversation. Thanks everyone watching and listening, and have a good week. Stay safe.